right, perfect. And I will hand it over to you, Uwe.
Okay.
I have to stop my share and you can take over.
Okay. Here we are. I would start now the PCAN Explorer and you will see the start screen, how the system comes up. The PCAN Explorer 6 is a CAN analyzer tool which runs on Microsoft Windows 10 and 11. We also support Windows 11 ARM-based systems. Since 3 or 4 weeks, we have released ARM drivers so that we also can use the software on ARM-based Windows PCs. The PCAN Explorer 6 need always projects. Also we work with projects. If you started a software, you need to create a new project. And this now. No, sorry. Bad mouse. And here we are. It's an empty project. We have the project manager, no items in there. And a project inside the PCAN Explorer always need a connection to the hardware. You find the connections here, and when I press add, I have the opportunity to select pre-selected networks. And to explain this, the interface between the hardware and the software itself always running over net. And that could be a virtual net for USB, alarm, PCIe interface, whatever. You can create your own nets with the tool which is included, where I have here my internal drivers, virtual, USB, and here, for example, USB FD. And if I like to create a net, I make here new net, and then I can select if I want to use CAN, CAN-FD, ISO CAN-FD, and then we have a lot of predefined bit rates, so that my net define which hardware I use on one side, and on the other side it defines which bit rates I exactly use. Especially for the CAN-FD, it's very, very important that you exactly know your sample point and things like that. Yeah. Can also go here. You can also define your own data sets depending on the used hardware with a clock frequency and a lot of settings. Mostly the problem is that when using CAN-FD, that the data bitrate timing doesn't work, because here we have the prescaler TSEC1, TSEC2, some jump wide. All these things must fit 100% to get CAN-FD network work. If you don't know how to set up, you must ask the manufacturer. They normally have all this information for you that you can use it to get it run on the network. I use a predefined SIE communication setup with 500K and 2 megabits. So we use a CAN-FD network today. I have here a small ECU which simply generates some data analog in and digital in, and I use a CAN USB FD interface, a simple CAN interface which support CAN 2.AV and also CAN-FD. And I select the. So when I have made the connection, you see here every object inside the PCAN Explorer have a property. When I select here the connection, I found here the properties of this connection. So I can enable, disable it. I can set if we want to receive error frames over this connection. We can set that we use the connection on the hardware only in listen only mode. This is very useful if you want to connect to an unknown bus and you don't want to destroy it. You set up listen only mode, give it a try with the data you set up for the configuration of the network. But if it fits, you see data. If it not fit, you don't disturb anything, because don't try to acknowledge. Yeah. We also can give the connection a name. Here is what I formally create the physical interface to the CAN USB with the defined networks, and we also can switch which protocol we use. At this webinar, we only use CAN. We are also of a G1939. If you select G1939, then the G1939 template will be loaded. We have also included the complete G1939 protocol stack inside the tool, so fragmented messages and things like that will also be available then. But we use only CAN at the moment. You can also switch the CAN bus, and you see now I have a very low bus load from 3%. This is part of the connection itself. Then you see here on the receive window, I see the incoming data. And for example, in the ID 100, a standard ID, 11-bit, and on one FD frame, I've set the same information. And when I change the data, you will see the first bytes will toggle. The difference between the standard CAN IDs and, for example, the FD frame, you see here the type, which means it's FD frame. It supports more than 8 data bytes, and it uses the data switch. The bitrate switch is on. This is shown here, because you can also define a CAN FD frame which doesn't use the bitrate switch. Then the bitrate switch will not be shown here. If I like to transmit a data, I go to the transmit window, right mouse click, new message, and then I can create one. Normally with data length up to 8 byte, but if I use CAN FD, I'm able to select up to 64 byte. Yeah. I can also switch on here bitrate switch if I want to use bitrate switch for sending, and the cycle time. Now the system sends out every 234 milliseconds FD frame with ID 234 to the device. But as you see in a moment, everything is in hex. You can simply select one, and then you see it also in ASCII, but it's in a nearly unreadable format. For that, we can implement a database type, which we call symbol files. Symbol files are only a description how the CAN data in the data part will be decoded by the software itself. There are other standards, for example, the CANDB standard from the company Vector, which also include a database. We can import, for example, the CANDB files. Then when you load CANDB files inside the PCAN Explorer, they will be changed to a symbol file. Then you can edit it, and you can also export back to a CANDB file. In the project manager, you see what we have selected at the moment. We have only selected, we have only created a connection, nothing more. Yeah. What I can now do, I can say I can add something more, and then I can go to my project. And there I can, for example, load a DBZ file or load a symbol file. Need some time. There we have the symbol file. That's a simple text file, a symbol file, which explain on which ID, with which LAN, on which bit size or the bit position is the signal placed. We also have a editor included, which is free for download. You can find it on our webpage, which simply create these text files. And I now started it. One moment. So, and here we have exactly this text file with our editor. And here you see you can also import a DBC file. That's possible. You see here the CANDB logo. So if you have a CANDB file, you simply import it. Then you can select which signals do you want to import, press OK, and then they are inside the PCAN symbol editor. I show you now, for example, the ID that you see here, the CAN FD ID. It's a long ID. Yeah. And it's defined ID itself. We give the ID a name. We have the ID itself. We can also use ranges if you like. We must set up the type. You can use standard, extended. For G1939, it's special version, FD standard or FD extended. Then we can make a selection about a direction if you only want to receive it, or if you also want to send it, or if you want both. This makes sense if you have a lot of symbols that you know exactly which one you are able to send to the CAN bus or which only should be received, so that you don't send out CAN data which will be sent by another node on the network. And we have some things like the timeout, which we can define. We can set the incoming CAN frame must become every 500 milliseconds. And I said the timeout is 510. And if the timeout is reached, then the information on the receive screen will get read that there's a timeout error. You can also log the timeouts in a tracer, things like that. For the ID itself, you select the data length. I have now 16 bytes. And then I can create the signals. Every signal is here placed in a different color. for example, the analog in, I have 2 bytes, and I called it IN12. I set the value to 0 to 65,000. It's a 12-bit analog digital converter, so it's less, it's 4096, but it doesn't matter. It's no problem. You can add a factor, an offset. So if you have, for example, an analog value, which you must calculate to a different value type, you can make a factor of 0.3 and an offset of 150, whatever you want. You see here the first signal inside the symbol started with bit 0 and it's 16-bit long. Yeah. Second one started with 16 and it's also 16-bit long, and so on. We start at bit 23 and so on. You also could move this inside graphical interface, but mostly it's better to do this with editor. So you can create for every CAN ID you want. For example, here an output ID. I use the ID 202 hexadecimal, call it output 2, and I have 2 PWM outputs that I can send. I use the unsigned value. From the data types, we support nearly all values which are available. A bit, a character. You can also decode strings, signed, unsigned, float, enums, double, and raw. And we also support Intel and Motorola format. And you can select how it will be seen in the trace file, for example, decimal, hexadecimal, or binary. It's depending on what you exactly want to do. You can also give the signals real names, which is normally in GFW unit. I have here, for example, the temperature of the board, which I use. I have a temperature sensor, and I send out the temperature on the ID 110. On start bit 0 to 8, it's an 8-bit value. Yeah. Maximum value is 255. Okay, and I need unsigned for this temperature. We will see later on that the temperature then will shown really in grad Celsius. Okay, don't save it. This is exactly what the editor create after that. It's a text file. So if you have a large database to set up, you simply could use a normal text editor and copy and saved it. And here you find, for example, the temperature again. Yeah. Okay. When I make apply to the symbol file, then the PCAN Explorer use this and decode the data in the way we defined it. And here we find, for example, the temperature. Yeah. And here the analog values. And if I change it on my body, you can see all 4 channels. I could change them. So we also have an option to trace data. When I start a tracer, it directly shows me all information and it's running. And if I stop it, I see that all incoming CAN IDs are set up with a symbol. If you, for example, have not all IDs defined in a symbol file, then you will see here nothing. Yeah, it's empty. If you define a symbol file, then you see the name of the symbol file. And if you go with the cursor over the database of the ID, you see the real signals. Changed.
So just so the terminology is clear, a trace is essentially just a recording of the CAN traffic on the network.
Exactly, yeah. So you can record it, and it's because the PCAN Explorer 6 is a 32 application. We offer memory logging, but you can also switch on to file-based logging, which is a better choice. And we also have macros, which comes with the unit. For example, the lossless trace. There you can select where you want to save the trace on a hard disk and how big is one trace block. And then you can run it until the hard disk is full. It's no problem. In the trace file itself, you could play back it. So if I press now this button, then it play back the trace file. That's possible. I can do this now, but as the other nodes send the same IDs, I will run into an error frames. Yeah, that's the problem. I also can define some filters. It's possible to give the filter a name, add an item, and then it can. The filter could be ID range from 2. It could be, when I use the options, I can trace, for example, only the error warnings or error frames. If I only use the error frames and I filter it for that and start it, and you will see it now records, but there are no error frames there. And I try to generate an error frame. I will see, yes, yeah. And here I see the error frames which come from the bus. I simply disturb the bus by making a shortcut between the lines. Yeah.
Can you say something quick about the time stamp on there?
Yeah, the timestamp, you can start with absolute time or relative time, as it is time between the different CAN frames. In this part is errors. Let me non-filter and start again. So here we see the times in milliseconds. No, I set now the tracer to a relative time, so I have a start time, and relative from the start time, this is the timestamp. When you save, for example, the tracer, you can save it, and then we save it in a file format we call a trace format. It's a text-based format, and we have different type of other formats available from other competitors or from other companies, and we offer a free converter. You can download it from our support tool, and then you can convert the trace file to, for example, RC file as an ASCII file, which could be also read with a canalizer, or you can send it to a CSV file for Excel, things like that. And when you make an export, you can here select, for example, here the CSV file. You can save the trace file as a raw message base. So you have only the CAN information itself, where you can say, I want to include error frames, error counters, status of change, events, things like that. You can save it as a CSV message base, as a raw CAN data, but you also can save the trace as signal based. So then it doesn't use the CAN ID, it uses the real signals which are placed in the data. The signals that we defined in the symbol editor. Yeah.
So, for example, the temperature that you created.
Exactly. Then you have the temperature and the analog in, analog to. You have in the first column you have the timestamp, and then you have all the signals, and you can read this into Excel and generate your own graph or do whatever you want with the things. There is no way back. If you have saved it as a raw signal information, then you never will come back to the CAN data. So from our side, we also always save the raw CAN data, because when we have the database, we always could merge them and can generate a signal-based data after that. That's no problem. Yeah, that's the main feature. You can run more than one tracer. You can run through 3, 4, whatever you want with different filters at the same time. That's no problem. All components of the PCAN Explorer are object-based, and we have a scripting language inside. We use as basic language Visual Basic Script, and all the data objects of the PCAN Explorer could be remotely controlled via the Visual Basic Script. So I can start very easily from a script. A tracer could create filters automatically. All these things are possible. When we see here make a reset so that when we see here the signals, if you have many signals, it would be hard to scroll up, down. And what you can do is we have a watch window. It's on the other screen, sorry. It looks like this, which you can plug in there. And there I can go and say, hey, I like to have the temperature and the analog input 1 and 2. And want to watch it, and then you see when I change it, I see the value and a bar graph. So some of the signals can be shown inside the watch window. It's only if you want to have a priority that you want to have a closer look at this. Okay.
Uwe, is there a limit to how big a trace file can be?
It's depending how you set it up. I can show you options, and then in the options you have all the setups of the tool. And here in Tracer, we use a temporary directory for the trace files while the trace is running, and there you can change dynamic linear ring. This is stored in the memory of the PC, but this is limited because it's a 32-bit application. You must keep this in mind. If the size is larger than 3 GB, then you will run into a problem because then the system will run out of memory. Also for the PCAN Explorer 6. The new PCAN Explorer 7, which come in 12 to 16 months, will run on a 64-bit, and then we have no limitations there. Normally, I use always file. Then you save directly to a file, and then it's no limitations. There's only the file size, and that's depending on which file system you use. Things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And you also can select the version. Automatically means if you use a CAN FD, for example, then it use a tracer version which support FD. If you don't use CAN FD frames, then it's use a file version which don't support.
Does that save on memory when you do that?
Sorry?
Does that save memory if you aren't using CAN FD and you pick a version that doesn't use it, or?
No, but if your network or
size of the file, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, also if you have FD frames, then you must use the newer version. Otherwise, the FD frame will simply not be saved. That makes no sense. But if you have FD frames on your network, you will also trace them. No?
Okay.
Yeah. And here you can configure the trace windows. Yeah. But the size for the memory base, if you, for example, use a ring, then you can select here how many messages are in the trace file. And if you start the tracer, you see here the size. We calculated the size if I change it. And when I use ring, then if it's reached the end, it starts at the beginning. Yeah. So you have always the last 1 million CAN frames or 10 million CAN frames in this buffer.
So it's a FIFO buffer, first in, first out.
It's a ring buffer, and this is
a ring. Oh, a ring buffer. I see.
Yeah. If you use linear, for example, then it simply stops after the buffer is full. That's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And dynamically, it's create what it's need. That's the reason why it's no, but make normally no sense. Also, I always use the file because that's no problem. Yeah. Normally, you have no problems with file space on a PC in this case. Yeah. Okay. So. The next is to show we have multiple options with add-ins in the PCAN Explorer. Here you see the data as a raw CAN data and now decoded, but we also could create panels or user interface tools. When I want to see the value, for example, the analog value, I create a new panel by simply selecting one of the instruments here. Then I have this unit, and as I say, every object have its properties. So if you select, for example, the panel itself, you see the properties. If I select an instrument, you see the properties. And with the properties, you can set up the complete instrument. You can set different sectors, everything what you want. And to select a signal, it's very easy. Right button click, and then we go to the analog in. Okay. When I go to run mode, and then I have OT.
What you can't see in the background is Uwe has a little micromod evaluation board with analog inputs that he's able to spin a dial and make the analog input move.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. By default, the instruments have a maximum value of 100, but I go, yeah, I know it's a 12-bit, so I have 169. I'm going to do this, run, and now I can see the full range of the analog value. Yeah. And so you can very easily create instruments. Also, for example, I'll pick this one, right mouse button, select signal, and then give, for example, for the temperature of the module I use, which the module send out. Run mode, and you see it's 25 degrees. Yeah. And you can use multiple panels of this, and you have a set order. Also, I have many layers. You can use many layers behind and switch between the layers. So, for example, if a CAN ID comes in and a special bit is set, I switch to a panel layer 5 and then have a complete different instrument. So I can also remotely change the panels. That's no problem. Yeah. The panel itself also have its properties. No, I can change the background, for example, sky blue. Then sky blue can use picture 6. Some of our customers create very, very cool panels. Yeah, you also could, if you are in run mode, it's possible. I don't know if it works on the webinar. Did you see that it runs in full screen mode? So the final customer, if it start a project in full screen mode, you don't see the PCAN Explorer in the background. You only see the user interface. That's possible. And as you can start a PCAN Explorer with projects automatically with scripting, you can run the PCAN Explorer as a panel. It's no problem to use in this way. These are only outputs, but we can also use inputs. For example, I use a slider, select the signal. Okay, I have no analog in here. So now it will change. I have, for example, I use a knob, which will be better because I have some digital outputs on my board. And when I take a button, put it there, select the signal. So it's a digital out here, which is simply LED on my test board. One more. So, and then you would see it will generate exact the signal. Yeah. When I switch this on, off, you see this will change. So what I do here will be transmitted automatically. I have nothing to do else. All symbols that are generated, I can use them in the panel, and when I change the values in the panel, the system itself sends it out. Yeah? And if, for example, I have a timestamp, a cycle time defined for this, then it will send out in the cycle time, and when I change it, it will and the next sample time, it will send the changes. Yeah? So it's very easy to build simple scripts to communicate with your boards. So
can you send multiple CAN IDs for a particular output, like a script?
Yeah, so if you can use scripts, I can show you how a script look like. This is the sample script that comes with the software. And inside the script, you can do whatever you want. You really could completely control the system, and you can also have access to the signals itself. So in the background, the PCAN Explorer receive CAN frames, decoded it, and create signals. The signals are like a variable that I could use inside the script. So I can ask, is digital in set, yes or no, or is it the value, and then I can do something. That's possible. Yeah. And also outputs. I can calculate something and set. I want to set the analog output to 450, and then the system create the ID and send it out. That's possible. But the scripting is for beginners. It's the start is not so easy. You must take a look at the complete samples. We have a very, very good documentation system inside the PCAN Explorer, which help you for scripting. I have it here. Sorry, automatic test. There we have usually script macros. So if you want to do scripting, you need to go to this sections and go step by step. We also offer a package with a lot of ready-to-use scripts that the customer could ask for, and we send it out. If you own a version of the PCAN Explorer 6, where are a lot of scripts included that you could use in your own projects. But to go deeper into the scripts, there's no time for that in this webinar.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. So what we also have is we have a plotter. Yeah. And with a plotter, I can simply go and select the signal. I go again for analog in. I'm going to start, and now I move my POTI, change values, and that's it. As it's very easy. You simply track it in, and then we have, and the plotter could support up to 1024 signals, but make no sense. Normally 30, 40 signals, and then it's done. Yeah? The plotter works like this. It really uses only the signal-based data. If you generate data inside the plotter, it is signal-based. You never will come back to the original CAN base. Yeah, it's very important. You can save the plotter files, and we offer a free plotter viewer, which looks exactly like this tool. It's free, available for download, and you can share your plotter files that you now could export. I can say file save, and then I generate a plotter file, and you give it to your college, and the college have the free available plotter viewer and load the plotter file and see exactly what you also have. Yeah, that's possible. You also could, when I run a trace, for example. So now I've made a trace, and I say import from tracer. I select the tracer. Okay. Then I select the channels I want to import. For example, the temperature also. Oops, sorry. And then I have all the information which is in the tracer and the plotter. And you can configure the plotter with many properties. I can show you the plotter itself, the basic layout. You can change this if you want. That's all possible. Here you select the channel, and at the end you press here. You simply have again the signals. Also, all is based on the signals. Yeah. You can also make short names. Then you have the. This means that if you use a huge project which use more than one symbol file, which is possible because we could support up to 64 channels in one PCAN Explorer, and then you can also use 64 symbol files, and then it's very hard to find out the correct signal. That's why we have the qualified short names, where you see the symbol file name and then the symbol file name and the signal again. If you have only one symbol file, you use the short names. Then you have directly the symbol name. Okay, close. And here it is. Yeah. What you can do, you can go to a channel and measure exactly the value at this position. Yeah. But also, this have every part of the PCAN Explorer. If you press the F1, you find a separated online help, which gives you all information about the user interface. And for making own projects more comfortable, as I say, you can use the Visual Basic scripting, and you can use the object model of every component, also for the plotter. So you can completely remotely set up a plotter with a Visual Basic script. That's up to you. Yeah. Also, we have customers which make huge projects which run Visual Basic script. They create everything only with scripts. Yeah. We have the object model. When we have this for the complete Explorer, for the user panel, for everything, we have this diagram of the object model. But this is done by scripting. Yeah. Okay. What else? The plotter and the user panel are optional add-ins. Maybe Rick can tell more about the add-ins. Also, the tool comes itself with a standard add-ins, like where is it? Yeah, the small line writer. And if you need if you need the plotter, the better version, if you want to use the plotter, then you need to buy these add-ins. So it's a basic model, and then you can buy the options as add-on.
Yeah, the add-ons are, I might forget one. So the user panel that you showed, the plotter, the J1939, and also the CANDB import for importing vector. Exactly, yeah. Because some people need it, some people need it not. And that's why we changed this. And yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The line writer itself, it's a simple version of the plotter with only 4 channels, but it also works.
So you don't have to pay for the plotter to get the line writer.
The line writer is free.
It's included in the base package.
Exactly. The line writer is part of the software. It is to see a trend. Yeah. Then it works. Yeah. Okay.
Well, have you covered all the material that you plan to?
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
the basics of the PCAN Explorer.
Yeah, so we have quite a lot of questions, so maybe we can start to go through a few of those from our attendees. And let me just look at a few of these here. Okay, someone asks, we have a LIN to CAN converter to be read, and the LDF file had conditional statements for physical data like current. Can that be included in the symbol generation file?
No, the LDF file is a special file format for LIN devices. And if you buy a LIN interface, LIN CAN interface, a LIN PC interface from our company, like the PLIN USB or the PCAN USB Pro FD, which include 2 CAN FD and 2 LIN, and then LinView Pro is a completely different software. It is nearly the same as the PCAN Explorer, but it's only for LIN. Also, we have no software where we include LIN and CAN. That's not possible. No.
Okay, thank you. Someone asked, I think this is when you were setting up symbols, Alexandra, can you show the enum decoding?
Yeah, we can create a simple enum. That's if we use the symbol editor for it, it's maybe more easier to understand. So when I add an enum, I give them a name, and then I add a value, value 0, string 1, add a value 2, string 2. Okay, it doesn't fit, but doesn't matter.
Okay.
And then later on, I can use this enum. I will save it. Okay, I will use this enum, and if the value of a signal get 0, 1, or 2, then it will write 1, 2, or 3. Yeah, so that's very easy to set up. To set up these enums. I must show if I have something which I could use. Digital input could be used. Yeah. Default enum, my enum, save. Yes, and there you see that's 2, 1. Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
That's very easy to set up, and you can also define ranges. Also, it's not necessary that you maybe I can show this. That you set when you set up an enum, you can also say from 0 to 120, and from 122 or 121 to 340, and then the string will be used. That's possible. Yeah, and if you use, for example, the comment, you also see the comment then if you move over the incoming signal. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. George asked, can you show conditional statements in the scripting file? I think you did show some of that after this question was asked and when you covered the help area, but I don't know if there's anything more you want to say about conditional statements.
Conditional statements, which conditional of the CAN bus or principal conditional statements of signals?
Yeah, I'm not sure. We might have to ask him for a clarification.
What you can do inside the script, you can get the information of every CAN connection. If the bus is healthy, you can see the error frame, the error counter, because we have an error counter. We can have different limits of errors which are allowed, and the CAN still will work. And normally it is moving up and down. You can read this and you can act and reset the CAN channel, for example. That's possible. Yeah, as in the scripting, you can do nearly everything. Yeah, but then I need exactly what the customer need, and they can contact us on the support, and we have samples, and we can send the samples to them.
Samples, yeah.
Yeah.
Another customer asked, and I think you kind of covered this a little bit, but maybe a little more detail would help. Is it possible to export the user panel as an exe file?
No, that's with this version, is definitely not possible. You always need a PCAN Explorer license in the background. I know that's expensive, but at the moment it's as it is. With a new PCAN Explorer 7, then we will have a version that we sell a runtime package. Yeah, and if the customer have this runtime package, he can create a panel, and if he's owner of the runtime package, he can distribute this with his customers, so he can give this away to his customers for free. And then the customer only have the runtime package and protected. That's also very helpful for our customers. That the way how it is created and what's in the background is protected, so the end customer only see the running panel. But this will be available only when we have the PCAN Explorer 7 ready. It's in progress.
It's in development now.
Yeah, it's in development now. Yeah.
Okay. This one we didn't cover, but it's a pretty common question, I think. Can you explain the difference between PCAN View and PCAN Explorer?
Yeah, I think that's very, very simple.
For everyone, while he's doing this, PCAN View is the free software that you get with any PC interface from PEAK. You can download it right now from their website.
Exactly.
You don't have to pay anything for it. And here he's going to start it and show
Yeah,
us.
genau. I've started PCAN View, and because I have only one hardware connected, the big View recognize that other software have access to this hardware, and so we are not able to change the bitrate. But we can connect exactly to the same. What I do now, I started, and what we see, this is PCAN View, and I delete the entries, and we see exactly the same information that we have seen before we use the symbol file. Also you see also FD bitrate switch, the CAN IDs, the database, for example, also an ASCII. But you are not able to decode the data in signal-based information. Yeah, but you can also run a trace. That's also possible if I run a trace. And we see the physical bus load. And the one feature which the PCAN View have and the PCAN Explorer does not have is the error generator when you use a CAN-FD interface from us, because we have our own CAN core, which is implemented in an FPGA. We were able, inside the CAN core, to destroy with a very high precision exactly one bit in a CAN stream. And so you can check all the other nodes, how they will react if I create, for example, a stuff bit error or a CSC error, or I destroy a CAN frame in the ID field, things like that. That's possible with the PCAN View here. And this is not possible with the PCAN Explorer at the moment. So there the PCAN View is the better choice to do this.
Okay, and the price is right.
The price for PCAN View is, if you buy hardware, you own a PCAN View.
That's right.
You see, maybe it's also a good information. I run the PCAN Explorer, the PCAN View run, and I can, sorry, do it again. So run a second PCAN View. That's no problem. I can run up to 64 applications on one hardware. And if I now send from the third application, the second PCAN View frame, you see it will receive here, because everything looks like our own CAN node. We have in the PCAN Explorer the tools where we have the status display. This shows us, here it is. This shows us how internally all is working. We have here our hardware. We have here the net that we defined. At the beginning, I defined this net. Then we have the PCAN Explorer. The PCAN Explorer itself have created our own client again for calculating the bus load. And we have our PCAN View 1 and 2, which I've started. And when I now stop on PCAN View, it's gone. Next PCAN View, it's gone. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you see exactly what happened on inside your system. And for people who develop their own application with our free API, they are simply also a client here and can connect to it and can use these tools to build their own application and test it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, I have a few more questions coming in. Do you support the CXPI communication protocol?
We support it, but not in the PCAN Explorer. Our company, no, let's see. If we go to products, software, Dingspaket, I change to English. You see all the software protocols we offer, and there you find also a CCP. Yeah, and the CCP is a software layer, runs on layer 2. And to see how these work together, you find it here. It's a free API, you can use it, but we don't offer any ready-to-use sample because we only prepare the API. Our customers do not need to implement their own CCP protocol. Everything is done by us, but the application must be done by the customer. The same for XCP, ISOTP, pass-through, UDS, and OBD2. And the OBD2, for example, used the UDS used the ISOTP, and the ISOTP used the layer 2. Yeah.
But PCAN Explorer is not aware of
No.
CCP or any of these other protocols.
The only protocol which the PCAN Explorer supports is the G1939.
Yeah. Okay. I think George responded. Let's see now. I'm going to back up to his question. Sorry. Okay. Can you have conditional statements in the text file? And then he said, in the scripting for the signals, can you have conditional statements?
That's no problem. Also, a signal is like a variable in a PC software. It will be synchronized in the background with the object system from the PCAN Explorer. So if a CAN ID come in, we change a signal because it's part of the CAN ID, then the variable inside of the script is automatically changed in the background. So you run, if you need a condition, is greater than, less. At the moment when you make the comparing, it used the latest signal value which come from the canvas.
Ah, great.
Yeah.
Let's see, here's another one. Can we use PCAN Explorer 6 for transmitting and receiving J1939 PGN messages and for testing UDS?
No, only PGN messages, UDS not from the PCAN Explorer. For UDS, we also have our own protocol stack, which is also free if you own a hardware. Which, you must develop your software by your own using the UDS API.
Yeah.
Also, it's a raw canalizer. The problem is if we start to implement such tools inside the PCAN Explorer, it gets more difficult to trainee and it's too complex then. It is a CAN analyzer for layer 2 with symbol based and G1939, but flashing ECU, things like that, it's not supported by the protocol, by the product. No.
Got it. Let's see, other than scaling and offset only, can the symbol generator file account for different scaling depending on the hex value? I'm not sure I understand that question.
No, I didn't understand that question, sorry.
So whoever typed that, if you're still there, if you could clarify.
Maybe he talks about a multiplexer. What possible is if you have, for example, a symbol file, which have a CAN ID 100, and then you have 8 data bytes. And the first data byte, the value of the first data byte, if it's 0, then the next data bytes have our own signal values, like a multiplexer. I can show it. That's possible. Also, simple multiplexers are possible. Yeah. Then you use the first data byte also as a information. It's like an extending of the CAN ID of the symbol. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if it's clear, maybe I can open the symbol editor. I need some time. When I add a multiplexer, and then can use the first 4, 6, 8 bits as a multiplexer, and the value of the first 7 bits in this sample, they decide what to do with the next bits. Yeah, so it's multiplexing. It's common in the automotive industry.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe this was the answer of the question. I don't.
I think that makes sense what you answered there. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure, Louis, what you mean exactly here. Which equipment will work with EODB CAN data for automotive OBD to read and edit data? So there's no native support for OBD, right?
We only have a API support for OBD.
Only the API.
Yeah. And what we offer, also free for download, our developers want to show our customers what's possible with a OBD2 interface that we developed, and they developed a completely OBD2 scanner tool with a dashboard with everything, which is downloadable from our website for free. You can download it, and there you can do nearly everything what you can do with OBD.
Nice.
Yeah. OBD2 Viewer is the name. Maybe I can show it. That's the tool. Yeah, it looks like this.
Very nice.
And it's free for download. Yeah, you need a PC interface from Peak, and that's all.
Just a PC interface, yeah, just like for CAN Explorer.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. A question on filtering during a trace. Can I filter on a CAN ID and also a data byte? For example, CAN ID equals 100 and byte 0 equals 55 hex.
No, that's not possible. Only ID ranges, yeah. And ID ranges could then be 1, 2, 3 to 1, 2, 3. Then I simply filter through this ID, but not
just one ID. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you can. Where is? Sorry, no, that's wrong.
ID ranges.
ID ranges, yeah. You can add several filters, and they will first in, and then the first filter, second filter, and what come out at the end. But it's not possible to go into the data bytes. That's not possible at the moment. You see here the options: CAN ID range, SGR, valve, code mask, if the people know what it is, or adjust the symbols. Then only symbols which are part of the project will be marked, but no data. But this could be very easily done with scripting. That's no problem.
Yeah. Rosh has asked, is there any support for CAN Open decoding? Not with your software, but I know there are several third-party packages that work with PCAN hardware.
Yeah, that's our partner company, which is part of the P group, EMSA. They offer the CAN Open Magic Lite. It's a special version of the CAN Open Magic Professional version, which works only with our hardware. We support them, though the cost is very cheap for this. There you can use our CAN interfaces with the CAN Open protocol.
Very nice. Okay, let me see. Rosh is also asking, is there any tutorials on using Peak software to create a CAN application with PCAN USB? In other words, I think he's looking for examples that work with the PCAN basic API. Are there software examples?
Yeah, there is a huge example codes included into the package. Download the latest package. We always update the package. Also, if you start a new project, first of all, download the package. And we have split it now in console application and in GUI applications. And we have samples for nearly every programming language and for every type of using filters, using threads for receiving, things like that. Yeah, and maybe for the .NET users, we have created a Nugget package, which is ready to give away, and this will be released in the next 1 or 2 weeks. And then you have a complete Nugget assembly for the .NET-based application. Then it's very, very easy to create your own application in 3 lines. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. We are almost to our 1 hour limit here. I want to just go through a couple more topics before we let everyone get away. And if people want to stay around for a few more minutes, if there are more questions, we can do that. We may be even able to, if you raise your hand, let you ask a question verbally. If you want to stick around for a few minutes after the finish here. So let me just share my screen. I'm going to take over for a minute.
Yep.
And I will share my screen. Sorry. Okay, so he did mention, I think he did, that there is a free 30-day evaluation of PCAN Explorer with all 4 of the plugins, add-ins. And you can just visit our website here and click on that link and download or request the 30-day evaluation, and we will send that to you. It usually takes about 1 day to turn that around. If you don't already have your PCAN PC interface, though, it's probably better to wait until you have one and then request the download so you get the full 30 days. Unless you want to start playing with it early. Also, a few of you have asked about some of these protocols, J1939, CAN Open, and UDS. We will be doing another webinar that goes into a little detail explaining these protocols with Torsten Gettig from Emultas. So join us on December 1st. There is a link on our website now available for you to sign up for that webinar. Just again, thank you all for your attendance for the webinar today. We will be sending out the recording of the webinar, so just watch your email for that if you have signed up. And there you see how to contact us all. A little bit about Peak. They're in Darmstadt, Germany. And they've been around since 1999, and Grid Connect, a partner, just about as long. And we have been started in 2003, and we're in Naperville, Illinois, so easy to find here in the US. And I will stop that and go back to the Q&A and see if there are any other questions here. So you're welcome to stay as long as you want. We'll answer questions for a few more minutes, maybe another 10 or 15 minutes if they keep coming in. Okay. Lewis says, what hardware do I need to buy to plug ODB to then view the PCAN ODB2 viewer? Do you
any CAN interface, PC CAN interface can be used? Yeah,
anyone. Yeah.
These CAN 2.8b, so you can use the standard one.
And there's a ODB 2 cable available on our website from Peak that you can just connect to the PCAN interface and then to the OBD2 connector in the vehicle.
Yep.
Let's see. Sometimes you get some stuff in the chat. Do you plan to support ODX or CDD formats?
Nope.
No plans.
No
Okay.
plans.
All right. And let's see. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand at the bottom there next to the chat and such. You can raise your hand if you wanted to ask a question. I can unmute you. Not seeing anyone raising a hand to ask verbally. Okay. Right. And let's see. Make sure I got through most of these. I think Gary answered some of these live. Can we create human readable documentation from the SIM file using PCAN symbol editor or another tool like a PDF or a Word document?
I think it's possible in the latest version. Let me see. Review. No, No, it's only in the text form. Yeah. Also if you use the editor, then you can print it out, but then you have it looked like the file, the original file.
Yeah.
As you see here. Yeah. No, but it's for me it's readable. No? If you see a CanDB file, instead a CanDB file is not readable if you don't know exactly how the brackets must be in. It's not readable. This is readable, but also a really documentation which goes out, it's not possible. No, that's not. But what we offer, I forgot this to say, we offer obfuscating tool, because we have some customers which don't want to give original symbol file to their customers, so they can obfuscate it, and then it is a unreadable format, and they can give it to the customer, and they can use it in the symbol editor. Yeah.
That's a $5 word, obfuscate. Yeah, that's a good word. That means to confuse or to hide, or it's a good way to not let the customer know your secret.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we're not seeing any other questions. Let's just real quickly mention how the licensing works for PCAN Explorer 6.
Yeah. We have, for this version, we have at PCAN Explorer 6, we have two license types. The first type is the PC-based, the single PC license type. You buy a license, get a license code, and you need to register latest after 30 days after installation your PC with this license. Then our system, we have a license server, contact the software, contact the license server, and your PC and the license are now merged. No? If you want to install it on a new PC, you must uninstall it, and then you can install it on a new PC. It's not possible to install it on multiple PCs. That's not possible. The other option, we have a copy protection dongle, a small USB key that you can plug in, and you also get a license file with this. And then you can install the software on many PCs you want, and where the red USB key is plugged in, it will work. And we also use, and also many of our customers use USB servers. They are very common. They are also available as software where you can plug in the USBs and you can share it over the network. This will also work with our protection dongle, but only one people can then have access to it. But you can switch between the people without moving the stick. That's
the physical dongle doesn't have to move, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you can have more than one dongle that are shared amongst multiple users, right?
No, that's not possible. Also one dongle is one seat. Yeah.
But I mean, if you had 15 people and two dongles, two people could use at any given time.
Yeah, that's
yeah. Okay. All right. I think that's it. I don't see any more questions coming in. Someone did ask if training is available in the US. Nothing planned at this point, but we will continue to work on content and ways to make using PCAN Explorer more easy to access. Anyway, I don't know if I said that right, but we'll continue to work on those things. And thank you again for joining the webinar. Have a great day, no matter where in the world you are, evening, morning, afternoon.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.